127 children and 18 staff members vanished overnight from an orphanage in 1982. And for 30 years, everyone believed the official story about a gas leak evacuation. Then, an urban explorer broke through a hidden wall and discovered something that would expose one of the most horrifying conspiracies in modern history. Before we dive into this absolutely chilling case, smash that subscribe button and tell me in the comments, would you have the courage to keep investigating if powerful people were willing to kill to keep their secrets buried? Because what Deputy Sheriff Sarah Manning uncovered will shake you to your core. It was a Tuesday morning when the kid walked into the sheriff's office. Early 20s, dirt under his fingernails, backpack slung over his shoulder, and that nervous energy that screamed he'd found something he shouldn't have. Sarah Manning was 3 cups of coffee deep into her shift, dealing with the usual small-town chaos when this urban explorer approached the front desk. He'd been poking around St. Catherine's Home for Children, that abandoned orphanage everyone in the county drove past without thinking twice about. The place had been empty for 3 decades, boarded up and forgotten. But this kid, Tyler, had discovered something in the basement that made him risk trespassing charges to report it to the police. He spread photographs across the counter, and Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. The images showed a hidden room behind a false wall, cramped and concrete, filled with metal bed frames that had leather restraints still attached. Filing cabinets, stacks of yellow documents, and something that made her blood run cold. Words carved into the concrete wall by desperate hands. They told us we were sick. We weren't sick. Help us. Below that message, dozens of names were scratched into the stone. Children's names, carved deep like whoever did it, had all the time in the world and nothing left to lose. Tyler handed her photocopied documents he'd found in that hidden room. Medical evaluation forms, transfer orders, disposal codes. One file showed a 7-year-old girl diagnosed with severe developmental delays and aggressive behavioral patterns. But handwritten in the margin in different ink, someone had scrawled the truth. Normal development, healthy child, transfer for bed space. Sarah read through the documents with growing horror. 23 children moved to a specialized care facility in February 1982. Just months before that supposed gas leak evacuation. And then there was a list, 47 children total, each marked with either transferred or processed. Next to the processed entries were dates and what looked like disposal codes. At the bottom of the page, in shaky handwriting, someone had written, "God forgive us." These babies never deserved this. Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She was going to that orphanage, and she was going to find out what really happened to those 127 children who vanished overnight. The drive to St. Catherine's took 20 minutes through winding county roads. When the building appeared through the tree line, it looked like something from a Gothic nightmare. 3 stories of red brick and broken windows, ivy crawling up the walls like fingers trying to pull the building back into the earth. But what Sarah found inside was so much worse than she could have imagined. Tyler led her through the abandoned hallways, past children's artwork still clinging to bulletin boards with their colors faded, past a wheelchair abandoned in a corner, and a child's sneaker with no mate. Down in the basement, through the hole Tyler had made in that false wall, Sarah stepped into a room that should never have existed in a children's home. The metal bed frames with restraints were just the beginning. Filing cabinets lined the walls, and when Tyler opened one, Sarah saw dozens of medical records, all for children between the ages of 5 and 15. The pattern was consistent and chilling. Children admitted to St. Catherine's as healthy orphans, then systematically reclassified as mentally ill or developmentally disabled. Normal childhood behaviors like crying at bedtime or asking for their parents were documented as symptoms of serious psychiatric conditions requiring immediate intervention and isolation. One file showed a 6-year-old girl named Angela Rose Whitman. The intake form described her as healthy, well-adjusted, above-average intelligence. But 3 weeks later, a psychiatric evaluation claimed she suffered from severe behavioral disorders. Handwritten notes in the margins told the real story. Child continues to ask for her mother. Resistant to sedation. Consider transfer to Ward C. But here's where this gets even more disturbing. Sarah discovered files marked with a red stripe across the drawer fronts. These weren't about orphans. These were maternity records. Live birth records showing women giving birth at St. Catherine's, holding healthy newborn babies. But the medical notes told a different story. Infants declared sick or dead, then secretly transferred to unknown locations. In every single case, the mothers were told their children had died. Sarah read through file after file, seeing the same pattern repeated. Over 15 months, 43 babies had been born at St. Catherine's. According to official records, 37 of them died from various complications. But handwritten notes revealed the truth. 37 healthy infants had been declared dead and secretly transferred to facilities throughout the region. And then Sarah found the correspondence. Letters between St. Catherine's and various institutions offering to pay $5,000 per healthy infant with bonus compensation for subjects under 6 months of age. Complete documentation, erasure, guaranteed. They were selling babies to psychiatric institutions for experiments. Sarah's radio crackled to life with a call that made everything more urgent. Someone had reported seeing flashlights in the building. Someone was watching them. Then she heard it. Footsteps above them, slow and deliberate. The sound of the basement door slamming shut, followed by the unmistakable click of a lock. They were trapped, and whoever locked them in knew exactly what they'd found. Sarah and Tyler managed to escape through a storm-drained tunnel that brought them up behind the building, covered in muck but alive. When backup finally cleared the barricaded door, Sarah knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about old crimes. There were still people out there protecting this conspiracy, people willing to kill to keep it buried. And she had a name to start with. Margaret Walsh, the woman who had signed off on those maternity operations, was still alive and living right there in town, running the food bank at the Methodist church. Sarah paid Walsh a visit, playing it casual at first. "Just following up on some old paperwork," she said. But Walsh knew exactly why a deputy was really there. When Sarah asked about the maternity ward and the babies who supposedly died, Walsh's grandmother mask started to slip. She tried to justify it, claiming they were helping unwed mothers and babies no one wanted, giving those children opportunities they never would have had. But when Sarah asked about Facility 7, the color drained from Walsh's face. She'd hit a nerve. Walsh's composure cracked completely. She admitted they'd been placing children in homes that could provide proper care. But Sarah knew the truth. Those babies weren't going to loving families. They were being sold to research facilities. As Sarah left Walsh's house, she saw the woman on the phone, speaking rapidly to someone. Walsh was making calls, warning people that the investigation was heating up. What happened next was swift and brutal. Within hours, Margaret Walsh was found dead in her living room chair, a gunshot wound to her temple, staged to look like suicide. But there were problems with the scene. Walsh was left-handed, but the gun was by her right hand. The tea service Sarah had seen that afternoon was gone, cleaned up by someone who didn't want anyone knowing Walsh had a visitor after the deputy left. The suicide note was too convenient, too perfectly timed. Someone had killed Margaret Walsh to silence her. And then Sarah's phone buzzed with a blocked text message. "Stop digging or you'll end up like Margaret. Some secrets are worth killing for." Sarah knew she needed to move fast. She tracked down Dr. Marcus Thornfield, the physician who had signed all those falsified death certificates 30 years ago. When she arrived at his retirement home, the 83-year-old doctor said something that shocked her. I've been wondering when someone would finally come." Thornfield didn't deny anything. He confessed to being a coward, to looking the other way while children were stolen and sold, to 30 years of nightmares about babies he declared dead who were very much alive. He explained how the operation worked. The state paid more for children with special needs, so they started creatively diagnosing difficult children as emotionally disturbed to secure additional funding. But it escalated. Margaret Walsh brought in new connections, people willing to pay significant money for specific types of children. Research facilities that needed subjects, private institutions that specialized in experimental treatments. Thornfield had kept copies of everything as insurance. Transfer records, facility locations, contact information for the administrators who ran the program. He handed Sarah an envelope containing an organizational chart showing the connections between St. Catherine's and various research facilities. Some of those facilities were still operating. Some of those people were still in positions of authority. Then came the call that changed everything. Margaret Walsh is dead. Apparent suicide. And before Sarah could even process that, another emergency came through. Structure fire at Sunset Manor Retirement Community. Thornfield's unit was engulfed in flames. By the time they arrived, the fire chief reported one victim, an elderly male, probably overcome by smoke. 2 witnesses dead in 3 hours. The people behind St. Catherine's were moving fast to eliminate anyone who could expose them, but they'd made one mistake. Thornfield's documents were still in Sarah's possession. The killers thought they'd eliminated all the evidence, but they were wrong. When Sarah returned to the sheriff's office, she found it ransacked. Someone had broken into the evidence locker and stolen every file they'd collected from St. Catherine's. An inside job. Someone in the department had betrayed them to protect a conspiracy that had been stealing and murdering children for decades. That's when things got personal. Sarah rushed home to find her front door standing open, her house torn apart. And on the kitchen table, someone had left a photograph that made her blood run cold. It showed an elderly woman sitting in what appeared to be a hospital room, holding a sign that read, "Stop the investigation, or she dies." The woman in the photo was Sarah's mother. Attached was a note with an address, Pine Valley Research Institute, Building C, Room 237. Come alone. Bring the Thornfield documents. You have 2 hours. Sarah knew it was a trap, but she also knew she couldn't leave her mother in the hands of people who had been murdering children for 30 years. She grabbed her digital recorder, tucked it into her jacket, and headed for Pine Valley. If she was walking into a trap, she was going to document every second of it. Pine Valley Research Institute looked abandoned from the outside, just faded brick and broken windows. But as Sarah drove closer, she noticed security cameras and one wayglass covering those supposedly broken windows. The building was very much in use. A man in a white lab coat met her at the entrance. Dr. Phillips. He led her inside, and the interior was nothing like the exterior suggested. Clean hallways, polished floors, the antiseptic smell of a functioning medical facility. As they descended in an elevator going deep underground, Phillips spoke casually about the research conducted there. Breakthroughs in psychology and neurology that had benefited countless people. Research conducted on stolen children, Sarah said. Children who would have grown up in poverty, Phillips replied smoothly. Here they contributed to something larger than themselves. The elevator doors opened onto a corridor that looked like a cross between a hospital and a prison. Doors lined both sides, each marked only with a number. Phillips called them long-term subjects. Children from St. Catherine's who had been there for 20 or 30 years, providing invaluable data on the effects of controlled environments on human development. Sarah's mother was in room 237, frightened but unharmed. Phillips took the Thornfield documents, then led Sarah to another room. Room 241. This subject has been with us since 1982, he said. Born at St. Catherine's, officially deceased at 3 days old, but actually one of our most successful long-term studies. Inside was a man in his early 30s with dark hair and intelligent eyes that looked familiar in a way that made Sarah's chest tighten. Subject M47, Phillips said. Or as he's known here, Michael. When Michael spoke, his voice was soft and hesitant. Hello? Are you a new doctor? Sarah felt like she'd been punched. This man had been born February 15th, 1982. The same night her mother went into premature labor at St. Catherine's. The same night she was told her baby had died. Michael, Sarah asked carefully, do you know what your last name is? He looked confused. I don't have a last name. Just Michael. Do you know where you came from? I've always been here. 30 years, Sarah whispered. You've kept him locked up for 30 years. Phillips explained that Michael had been well cared for, contributing to dozens of research studies on institutionalization and psychological adaptation. He had no concept of life outside the facility, no social skills, no practical knowledge. Releasing him would be cruel, Phillips claimed. But then Sarah said something that changed everything. Michael, what if I told you that you have a mother? A real mother who's been looking for you your whole life. Michael stood up slowly. Are you my mother? Sarah's heart broke. No, Michael. But I think I might be your sister. The words hung in the air. Phillips went white, realizing Sarah had just revealed something he hadn't known. Michael's institutional conditioning began to crack. I always wondered why I remembered singing, he said quietly. A woman singing to Bab. Me. The doctors said it was impossible. But I remembered. Our mother used to sing lullabies, Sarah said, her voice breaking. That's when Michael made his move. When Phillips reached for an alarm button, Michael grabbed his wrist. No more tests. No more questions. I want to see outside. And then Michael revealed something that would save them all. There are 26 people imprisoned in that building. 26 stolen children who had grown into adults in captivity. Michael knew the facility inside and out. He'd been mapping the service tunnels for years, counting the other subjects, watching and listening. He led Sarah through hidden passages to the communal area where 23 adults sat eating from plastic trays, all wearing identical gray uniforms, all with the pale, hollow look of people who had never seen sunlight. When Michael told them they could leave, that the outside world was real, some began crying. Others cowered, expecting punishment. A woman who appeared to be in her 30s said her name was Subject F23. That she'd been born there. Sarah showed them a photo of the sky and trees. This is what's above us right now. Sun, trees, fresh air. Then they heard helicopters overhead and sirens approaching. Federal agents were moving in. Sarah held up her badge as armed agents poured into the room. These are victims, not suspects. The chaos that followed would take months to sort out. 26 people who had never seen law enforcement, reacting with terror. Agents trying to secure the facility while treating traumatized victims. But in the middle of it all, Sarah sat beside Michael as he asked the question she'd been waiting 30 years to answer. What's our mother's name? Linda, Sarah said. Her name is Linda Manning, and she's been waiting to sing you lullabies again. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the courthouse as final verdicts were read. Dr. Phillips, life in prison without parole. 3 facility administrators, 25 to life. A state official who had protected the operation, 15 years. Of the 26 people rescued from Pine Valley, 18 had been successfully reunited with family members. Michael, whose real name was David Michael Manning, lived with Sarah and their mother now, slowly learning what it meant to be part of a family. The conspiracy that operated for decades was broken. The children who had been stolen were coming home, and every morning Michael asked Sarah the same question. What are we going to do today? For 30 years, that question had been answered for him by people who saw him as a research subject. Now, finally, he got to answer it himself. Because sometimes the most important investigations aren't about solving crimes. They're about bringing families back together. So here's my question for you. If you discovered evidence of a conspiracy this deep, this protected by powerful people, would you have the courage to keep digging, even knowing it could cost you everything? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe, because there are too many stolen childhoods that need to be brought to light. Share this video with someone who needs to understand that some heroes wear badges and never give up on bringing people home. Thanks for watching. And remember, the truth is always worth fighting for, no matter how deep it's buried.